Good morning, party people, and welcome to the first office hours of 2025. I see we have SQL Dev DBA in the house, resubscribing. Finch says, what channel is the car video from and music? That is from my personal YouTube channel, where whenever I go on trips with one of the cars, did I center that correctly? Yeah. Whenever I go on trips with one of the cars, I'll often stick a GoPro on the dashboard or out the back window or whatever. So I believe that particular video was from Iceland, driving around in the summer, going through the clouds. Just absolutely gorgeous. Really excited going back to Iceland in about February 15th or so, going for another 3 weeks to take Eve through there. It's Eve's first time in Iceland. Will be really nice. I got Morrison here, Boss Nomad, Chandler Gray, all kinds of folks. So for this office hours, several of the questions in the queue require really long answers, or don't require, but like I want to give really long answers. Oh, hi, Jim Van Allen. So these probably aren't going to show up on TikTok because TikTok has like a 60 or 90 second limit on videos. I mean, you can post longer, but like the algorithm really penalizes you. So this one will probably be one that just stays on YouTube. So let's go through. The first question is from Josef. What is table partitioning and can it improve performance? Now, this sounds like an RTFM kind of question. Like I can just answer it with one single line. Go to brentozar.com/go/partitioning. brentozar.com/go/partitioning, where we've got a free collection of resources. A lot of stuff that we've written over the years. There's nothing new, but that's because there hasn't been any improvements in SQL Server's partitioning in like a decade. It still works basically the same way that it always does. But the short answer with that is it can help loading data or dropping data if you partition with the same granularity that you load or drop. Like if you load an entire day's worth of data all at the same time, or you drop an entire day's worth of data at the same time, and you partition by that, then you can get easier loads and faster drops. It's so rare that I see people doing that, though, because most of the time when people do data warehouses, reporting systems, whatever, they want to load in near real time and they want to do updates over time, like they want to have their ETL process reload stuff from a certain range. So it tends to not really make query performance faster. You can certainly read more about that, though, over at brentozar.com/go/partitioning. In the last 20 years, I don't think that I recommended partitioning successfully once for row store tables. Column store tables is different. For column store, it actually makes a whole lot of sense. And I talk about that in my Fundamentals of Column Store class. Next up, DBAMatt asks, if there was a Mount Rushmore... Oh, thank you, Jim Van Allen. Thanks for the subscription. Woo, renewal. DBAMatt says, if there was a new Mount Rushmore with the heads of SQL pros who've greatly impacted the world, who would you want to see up there? So my answer is going to be different than I think what most people would answer. Most people will answer the names of bloggers and presenters, individuals that they see frequently. So you usually see, I'm having to adjust the camera lock because I reset up my home office when I got back here after China, because I took a lot of my camera gear with me and one of my cameras was stolen. It sucks. It's a brand new like $3,000 camera with a $2,000 lens attached. I was not a happy camper about that. But so what you usually see is individuals who make contributions, whether it's via blog posts or via online videos or social media or LinkedIn, whatever. But there's a whole class of people who do unbelievable work to make the community run smoothly. And I'm talking about people who volunteer, who organize local events, regional events, that kind of thing, who really bust their humps to make sure that y'all get free educational material. And most of their names you haven't heard. And the reason why I say that is that one of them just retired. Kathy Kellenberger Both her first and last names start with a K. Kathy Kellenberger just retired after decades of service to the SQL Server community. She volunteered for the longest time doing all kinds of event stuff around PASS, helping make sure that events run smoothly. And you would never see her name or know her by sight unless you were one of the contributors, like if you're a speaker, an author, or whatever, you would have known Kathy. And so she's got dozens, hundreds of messages on her LinkedIn profile talking, congratulating her on her retirement last week. If there was a Mount Rushmore, it's a shame that you would want it to be giant because there's so many people who have dedicated their lives. And they weren't building consulting brands or training brands. They were just doing it purely for the love of the community. And I would love to see folks like that celebrated more as opposed to just me. Okay, let's see here. Next up, we have DBA Magician Girl, who says, what's the sales pitch for SQL Server editions other than Dev, Standard, or Enterprise? I thought the others were just toys, but they're signed up for your constant care. So there was another edition called BI. I don't even think they still sell Business Intelligence Edition. That was just really to have a small server that served as a data warehouse, but it's kind of dead and gone now. But the two ones, and people still have it. It's still out there in Constant Care's metrics. But the two that are still pushed is Express Edition, and I believe Web Edition is still available to software as a service companies. The sales pitches for each of those. Express Edition is free. It's really useful for people who do embedded applications. I'll give you an example. So I was working for a liquor sales company, true story. Working for, before I started consulting, I was a database administrator for a wine and spirits company, and we had like 7,000 salespeople, and those salespeople all had laptops. Every day when they went out to go to different restaurants and bars to do sales, they had their laptop and they would have last night's inventory on it and all our products and all our pricing and stuff like that. They would, while they were disconnected out at these restaurants and bars that could have crappy internet connections, they would sell products. They'd be entering in orders into our application. It would all go onto a local SQL Express edition. Chandler Gray, thanks. Welcome in the subscriptions. Woohoo! And they would do all this work locally. Then at the end of the day, they would sync sink into the sea. They would sync their data with our central server, and we didn't use SQL Server's replication. We rolled our own to make it a little bit more reliable. I say we. I had nothing to do with the coding. The company did all of that work. The developers were very smart. It was really impressive stuff. So that let us have basically 7,000 instances of SQL Server without paying for it because it was Express Edition. It was tiny. The salespeople only got their own products and their own orders and their own customers on their local database, so it could keep it nice and tiny. Very cost effective because then our developers who just use the Microsoft stack, Visual Studio, tools that they were used to, could use the same tooling for the laptop databases that they used for the server databases. If you wonder whether or not it's painful to manage 7,000 laptops running SQL Server, I can assure you that it is. I can assure you that it is. They traded off they traded easier development complexity in exchange for higher systems administration complexity. So like we had a dedicated help desk team who would help us, salespeople, figure out how to resync their databases whenever things went wrong and do things like patching, stuff like that. SQL Dev DBA says, and this is way before DBA tools, so I can't imagine. Yeah, it was way before PowerShell. That was tough stuff. And I didn't do any of that work either. Thankfully, that whole process was well designed. The support process was well designed before I got there. So I always want to make it clear that I can't take credit for any of that stuff. I would have been proud to have been involved in the design and implementing of it because I thought it was a brilliant solution, really well done. The other edition, that's Express Edition. I told you these answers were going to be kind of long today. The other edition that has some traction out there is Web Edition, and who that's for is software as a service providers. They can get it through Microsoft licensing, and they have a special deal with how they pay for it on a monthly basis. I don't even know if that's still sold. I mean, I hardly ever see it. I'm going to do a quick Google, SQL Server 2022 editions. There's a really good pricing sheet that they have. Let's see here. Yeah, web is still a thing. The technical name of it says SQL Server Web Edition is a low total cost of ownership option for web hosters. And they go on to talk more about it. But that's really who it's for, software as a service companies who pay monthly for their licensing instead of buying it outright. All right, let's see here. Next up, who do we have? Oh, Juan has an interesting question. Juan says, an ERP package has an internal benchmark tool for SQL that runs inside the ERP app. It does a read of 100,000 records from a few tables, a few copy, then writes, and then it reports results in terms of milliseconds. He says, my gut tells me the test is useless. Am I wrong? It's probably useless in your environment because you are probably a good database administrator who has properly provisioned their hardware. You're not trying to run SQL Server on a netbook from 1998. But that poor ERP vendor, you would not, and I don't say that because I know them. I don't know who it is, but I've worked for so many software as a service companies or independent software vendor companies. You would not believe how companies try to get by with really crappy hardware and just stuff that would blow your mind how bad it is. I've seen people try to run ERP apps on like 1 CPU core, 2 CPU cores, 4 gigabytes of RAM, local SATA drives, like spinning rusty hard drives, just atrocious stuff. So while it might seem useless to you, there may be scenarios where performance is so bad that even in that little test, the results come back in seconds. And that way it's just a good, real quick sniff test for the vendor to say, okay, wait, hold on, something is seriously broken in this environment. It's not that they're trying to measure the fastest SQL servers out there, because it sounds like based on the tests that you're talking about, that should be able to complete fairly quickly, even on a decent modern laptop. But if it can't complete quickly, that's a great sign for a support call to stop and start getting their account executives involved to say, politically, what are we doing running on this hardware? Next up, Charo says, I have an 8 terabyte database with 2 terabytes of free space and it's part of an availability group. I'm thinking about truncating my largest tables. Wait, hold on. What do you mean truncating? You're thinking about truncating your... Hold on. That sets off all kinds of warning bells. If you already have 2 terabytes worth of free space and you're talking about truncating tables, you want to make sure that the users are actually okay with the data that you're dropping. I get really nervous when people say that they're just going to go truncate tables. This continues by saying, I'm going to shrink the database, move the database to a newly added disk, restore a copy of the database, copy the... Hold on. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? You'll hear me ask that all the time inside this channel, but the processes that you're about to describe are extremely labor intensive on your part. They are outage intensive. Users are going to feel these operations on an 8 terabyte database. Not the truncating of the logs, or the truncating of tables, that's fairly quick, but I get really sketched out when people say they're going to truncate an entire table. So what's the problem that you're really trying to solve here? And what are the users going to notice as a difference when you're done? I don't doubt that you have good problems in mind, but I would want to know more about what those are. Chris says a resume building solution. Yeah, it would be really easy to get yourself fired for doing stuff like this if the users aren't asking for it. Now, it is noble to save space when you're up at an 8 terabyte database because hosting is a pain in the rear. Backups, if you're doing conventional backups instead of SAN snapshots, are terrible. Restoring onto development and QA environments can be terrible. Now, if you were at 8 terabytes and you've got 2 terabytes free, and you were talking about doing all this shuffling, I'd say it's 25% free space. I know 2 terabytes sounds like a lot, but if you're still going to end up with 6 terabytes left over, I don't think you're really going to notice the difference between 8 terabytes and 2 terabytes. So like ProHiller says, someone's trying to probably save 2 terabytes of disk space and reporting disk space savings by shrinking the tables. Yeah, if you're on Azure, you actually can get a savings on specifically Azure SQL DB managed instances. You can get a savings if you cut the amount of storage that you need and the amount of storage that you have to provision. But when we're only talking about 25% free space, how many seats does your car have? The car that you drive around, whether it's to work or out for fun, how many seats does that car have? Let's say you have a 4-seat car and you and your partner and 1 child frequently run errands, and there's 3 out of 4 seats are occupied. That's 75% occupancy. That's about the same as 6 terabytes out of 8 terabytes. Would you actually say, you know what we need to do is we need to save a little weight on this car. We need to figure out how to take out one of those seats. 1 extra seat, that's a real... No one's complaining that you have 1 extra seat in the car. And besides, your partner has talked to me, and they're really interested in having another child. They don't think you're ready for it yet. They haven't talked to you about this. But you just probably want to leave an extra little capacity in there just in case, because people are probably going to load more children into the car. You're going to take a friend somewhere. Your kid's going to have some friend in there, whatever it is. So I don't know that I would really freak out about 25% free space. Now, you did say that you had an 8 terabyte database and you're thinking about truncating additional tables. Sometimes what I deal with is I have a database administrator who walks into a shop and it's never had any loving care from a database administrator for a while, and you're doing all kinds of really good housekeeping, you're fixing things. In that case, if you're actually going to drop it from, say, 8 terabytes to 3 or 4 terabytes, and you don't think you're ever going to need those other 4 or 5 terabytes worth of free space again, then what you describe could work, but it's not going to work well in terms of shrinking. Shrinking is a single-threaded operation. Only works 1 8K page at a time. It's going to take forever to run across terabytes of data. So what you want is a multi-threaded operation that's going to accomplish this. And the way that you do that is to add a new file group with new files in it and start moving the data over into it, 1 object at a time. Because that way you can do it with online index rebuilds and move it over into a new file group. That is easier to do in terms of user visibility and won't be quite as much of a blocking operation. ProHiller says, I recently came across talented, air quotes, IT managers who are tasked to refresh storage hardware and push these aggressive archiving ideas in order to save disk space and invest less in storage. Yeah, I've seen that a lot, especially with cloud, because people say, oh, cloud storage is really expensive. We need to cut down on what we use. And then they don't realize that if you cut your storage size numbers and you decide to re-provision to a smaller one, you're going to have slower performance because most cloud performance is based on the amount of storage space that you provision. So if you take an 8 terabyte amount of space, say that you've got 8 terabytes allocated today and you drop it to 3 terabytes, you could have dramatically slower storage throughput, which could affect your query speeds, which will end up backfiring on you in a big way. So be careful with that. I love this next question. It sounds sarcastic, but it's really actually a good question, and I have a good answer for this. DirtyReadsDoneDirtCheap says, what common mistakes do DBAs make in their love lives? I think I'm ready to start mine. No, that's a great joke, but I will give you real, honest lifetime advice here. If you're going to be in IT, especially production support IT like database administration, it is really easy to work too many hours. It's really easy to end up doing on-call work, to end up voluntarily taking on tasks after hours, to log into and just check to see what's going on, because you feel personally responsible for your servers. You're a good person. You want to be proud of the work that you're doing. You want your users to have a great experience. When things go wrong, you want to fix them. You want to be helpful and valued. And then the next thing that you know, you're working 80 hours a week and you're not doing what's necessary to support your family's requirements or your love life's requirements as well. So the thing that really opened my eyes was the book Getting Things Done by David Allen. And it's an interesting book. It's kind of old now, but it's still pretty useful. I'm going to boil down the most interesting part. You know how you have like an issues list or a task list of stuff that you need to do at work? You see where I'm going with this? Work is just one department in your life. It's just one part of your job. You need to make a task list for things that you need to do for your family, for your loved ones, for your mental health, for your physical health, for your financial health. And those, if we're really honest, are more important than your work. And you're tracking them less. And I say you, I mean, I was just as guilty when I first started reading that and thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so screwed. And then I started making those tasks lists, and it became much easier to check out at 5 p.m., so to speak. It became much easier for me to say, I'm sorry, I would love to keep working on this, but I have an engagement that I have to attend at home. And at first people think that, and I thought, that bosses would want to micromanage, be like, well, what do you have to do? What is it that's so important? And I'm like, I can't tell you that, but it's a personal obligation that I have. It doesn't have to be on the clock. You don't have to have your daughter's ballet recital. It can be something that you've arranged for your mental health just to get the holy hell out of the office. So start thinking of those task lists and things that you have to do to make progress or in your own personal life. That is, I think, the most common mistake that people make in their work-life balance is that they only think about their work tasks and they don't have, like, for example, Jira for home. SQL Dev DBA reminds me of the quote from Lori Edwards, the people who you really work for are waiting for you at home. I love that quote from Lori. She's a great Instagram follower as well, although I don't know her Instagram name off the top of her head, top of my head, because I've followed her for so long. Code with Sean says Reich has a free level. I like Remember the Milk. I've used it for my whole life, but there's so many to-do lists. I don't even care which one you use. If I was going to start over these days, I'd use the one built into Apple OS X because it syncs with iPads and phones and all that. But whatever, anything you use, just start writing down what are the tasks that you want to accomplish for personal success, love life, working out, eating, whatever it is. All right, let's see here. Next up, MartinDBA says, how many people are behind the Brent Ozar Unlimited kingdom? Right now, there are only 3. There's me, my ex-wife, Erica. We were business partners. We were together for like 20 years. So when we got divorced, she has 49% of the company. I have 51%. So she still works with the company. If you interact with us professionally, like work with us on contracts or bills or accounting, you've likely worked with Erica or her name has come up. We still talk all the time, just as part of the business management stuff. And then Richie Rump, my developer. I say my developer. I'm always like really personal. I'm like, he's mine. Don't touch him. Richie Rump is a developer who's behind everything from Pace the Plan, the consultant toolkit. Now all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank. Pace the Plan, Consultant Toolkit, and SQL Constant Care. And we're always looking at fun new things that we can do. One of the things that I'm kind of kicking around with for 2025 is using with pacetheplan.com, sending the plan to ChatGPT and getting advice on the query plan. And we would eat the cost on that because I think it's pretty low and it's relatively easy to do. And I think I might be able to do it in a way that's faster than what Microsoft is going to achieve with SQL Server Management Studio's Copilot, and might be helpful for people. But I've got to actually make it give helpful advice first, which is a little bit harder than you can do. SQL Dev DBA says, I'm waiting for more Away from the Keyboard podcast from Richie. Yeah, so Richie used to co-host that with Cecil. I forget Cecil's last name. And they both have had just life changes with everything that's gone on in their lives. And so I don't think that they're doing any more of that or don't have any plans for it in the future. Richie just moved to Orlando. I say just, I mean, it was a few months ago, but has moved to Orlando now. And so it just makes things logistically more tricky and complicated. Let's see, we'll do one more. Don Kiddick asks, oh, hi, Renegade, good to see you. Don Kiddick says, Brent, one of our SQL servers, 2016, uses always on to provide a read-only secondary, but I'm being asked if queries run on the secondary can force a bottleneck on the primary. Yes. Well, not all the answers today are going to be long. That's just a yes. There you go. All right, so thanks for hanging out with me today on Office Hours. Now, I've procrastinated as long as I possibly can. Now it's time to actually get some real work done around the office. It's like 9:30 a.m. It is January the 2nd, and I am forced to get back into the stream of things, having been gone from the office for about a month. I went to China for like a week and a half, went to Japan for a couple of weeks, partied here in Vegas for New Year's, and now I just have to settle down and face the truth. Although I don't know that anybody's really doing a whole lot of work on the Thursday, Friday thing right after New Year's, but we'll see if I can rustle up and get something done. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me, and I will see y'all on the next Office Hours. Adios.